Wildfires in the southeast rage on for a fifth day and are spreading fast to neighboring areas, leaving some 20 people dead. An appellate court overturned the lower court ruling and acquitted the main opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung of election violation charges. The result is deemed critical for the nation's political landscape. Amid chronic population concerns, the number of newborns continued to increase in January to almost 24,000, recording the highest on-year growth percentage on record. It's March 26, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jang-min. We begin with devastating wildfires that started last week in the southeastern part of the country. As it gets worse, some 20 people have been killed. Our Eun-hee is standing by at one of the areas hit hard by the disaster. Eun-hee, how is the situation there?
Yes, Jang-min, so now I'm in Andong City in Gyeongsang-buk-do Province. The wildfire that started in Uiseong-gun County on Saturday continues to spread. And where I'm standing right now is Haue Maul, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. A fire that is around 5 to 10 kilometers away from the village has been carrying smoke towards the area, and by noon today the smoke has thickened to a level where it's hard to breathe without wearing a mask. Residents have been evacuated and moving back and forth depending on the situation. Firefighters and residents are focusing on spraying water on homes and structures in the village every 2 hours to protect them from the flames. In this map, you can see how the fire has been spreading to neighboring cities and counties due to strong winds, including the counties of Yeongdeok, Yeongyang, Cheongsong, and here in Andong. On my way to the site a few hours ago, there was an evacuation order for residents in certain areas of Andong City. The challenging weather conditions, however, have been complicating the firefighting efforts. Meanwhile, the wildfire that started in Sancheong-gun County in Gyeongsang-namdo Province on Friday has been raging on for 6 days now. The flames have now spread to Hadong-gun County, even reaching around 200 meters inside Jirisan National Park. The containment rate, which was at 90% at one point on Tuesday, fell to 75% at around noon today. Authorities are fully mobilizing helicopters and ground firefighting teams in the area to bring the fire under control. However, the damage is worsening, and as of this evening, over 1,500 residents have been relocated to shelters. As residents are fleeing from the chaos, multiple casualties have been reported in Gyeongsang-buk-do Province and Gyeongsang-namdo Province. The latest update as of this evening shows a provisional estimate of at least 24 people dead and at least 26 injured. While one elderly person was found to have been completely consumed by the fire, others died during the evacuation process. The areas most heavily impacted are Uiseong-gun County and Andong City, where over 370 square kilometers have been affected. As of Wednesday, however, over 23,000 people are taking shelter in temporary facilities. Also, more than 200 structures, including homes, factories, cultural heritage sites, have been damaged by the flames.
Looks very serious. Eun-hee, how have authorities been responding?
Yes, according to the government, over 100 helicopters are actively involved in the operation. But at around noon today, one helicopter crashed at the scene in Uiseong-gun County, with the pilot confirmed dead at the scene. Additionally, over 4,500 personnel are actively involved, and over 500 firefighting units focusing on key facilities and densely populated areas of Uiseong, Andong, Yeongyang, Cheongsong, and Yeongdeok.
The Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters, along with relevant ministries, local governments, public institutions, volunteers, and village leaders on the front lines, is fully mobilizing all efforts to combat the wildfire and protect residential areas.
We are eagerly awaiting the rain forecast for tonight and tomorrow, but the expected amount is small, so it's uncertain whether it will help extinguish the fire. But even a small amount could offer some relief, and authorities are hoping for any assistance it may bring. That's all I have for you, Jang-min.
All right, that was our Ian here reporting live from Andong in Gyeongsang-buk-do province. Do stay safe. In related news, major political parties are joining efforts to combat the devastating wildfires. The ruling People Power Party formed a special committee on Wednesday to aid fire suppression and discuss recovery strategies. It also called for bipartisan cooperation to ensure public safety. The main opposition Democratic Party also pledged full support, urging authorities to do their best as the fires spread across regions. We now turn to a major ruling today that could mean much to the politics on the local front. An appellate court acquitted the opposition leader Lee Jae-myung of election violation charges, overturning the lower court's decision. Our correspondent Shin Ha-young explains.
The main opposition Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung has been acquitted by an appeals court with regard to election violation charges. The Seoul High Court on Wednesday overturned a ruling by a lower court which had handed Lee a suspended prison term. Lee was indicted on charges of making false statements in December 2021 during a media interview where he denied knowing the late Kim Moon-gi, an executive involved in a development scandal in Andong City where Lee previously served as mayor. He is also accused of having made false claims that there was pressure from South Korea's land ministry to rezone a research institute site in the Baekhyun-dong area. The appellate court ruled that neither of the statements made by Lee can be seen as spreading false information, overturning the Seoul Central District Court's ruling in November. The lower court found Lee guilty of making false statements, though it said that parts of statements regarding Kim could not be considered a violation of the election law. It handed Lee a 1-year prison sentence, suspended for 2 years. Prosecutors demanded the Seoul High Court give a 2-year prison term for Lee during the appellate trial, the same sentence as they demanded in the first trial. Right after the ruling, Lee thanked the court for delivering what he called a proper ruling.
I appreciate the court for delivering a proper ruling based on truth and justice, but it's frustrating that so much effort and national resources were spent on something so obvious.
The DP also welcomed the ruling, saying that the investigation and indictment were baseless from the start. Meanwhile, the ruling People Power Party expressed regret over court's ruling and said that it will wait for the Supreme Court's decision.
We deeply regret this ruling. Many politicians have lost their political careers due to false statement charges, so I can't understand how Lee was acquitted on the same issue, even from a legal professional's perspective.
The prosecution announced that it will appeal the Seoul High Court's ruling at the Supreme Court. Now, if the Supreme Court decides to overturn Wednesday's ruling, sentencing Lee to a fine of 1 million Korean won, which is about $680 or more, he would lose his legislative seat and be barred from running in elections for 5 years. If sentenced to a prison term, the ban extends to 10 years. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
For a closer look on what today's ruling could mean for the nation, we're joined by our political correspondent Kim Do-yeon. Do-yeon, why does the opposition's leader legal case matter?
First, Sung-min, the obvious reason is that Democratic Party of Korea Chair Lee Jae-myung is the most favored candidate to be the next president. And as we all know, there could be an early presidential election that will kick off within a matter of weeks if the Constitutional Court upholds President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment. Take a look at the most recent survey. According to a survey conducted by Gallup Korea on 1,003 adults aged over 18 from last Tuesday to Thursday, DP leader Lee Jae-myung was the most favored candidate for the next presidency at 36%, followed by Labor Minister Kim Moon-soo at 9% and former PPP leader Han Dong-un at 4%. This, of course, was surveyed before the ruling today. That means there are some swing voters who could have had doubts over Lee Jae-myung due to the legal battles, and since he's been found not guilty, he could be attracting more voters.
But is this case over and done with?
Of course, the case can be taken to the Supreme Court, as we heard from Ha-young, which will be then the final and definite ruling. Now, since it's the prosecutors that lost the case this time, at the appeals court, they're the ones that will have to give the appeals to the case. The ruling People Power Party lawmakers are already calling for prosecutors to do so. As we saw from Ha-young's report just now, if there is an appeal and if the Supreme Court overturns the latest decision to acquit Lee Jae-myung, Lee will lose his legislative seat and be barred from running for a public office for the next 5 years. Here's the thing, the Supreme Court has 3 months to make a ruling if prosecutors do appeal. That means even if the Constitutional Court's decision to uphold President Yoon's impeachment will kick off the presidential election within a couple of weeks, it will have to be done in just 60 days. This means, theoretically speaking, DP Chair Lee Jae-myung could be the president before the Supreme Court rules on his case anyway, which would pause the legal process. Article 84 of South Korea's constitution states that the president shall not be charged with a criminal offense during his tenure of office, barring insurrection or treason. And it's all up to the Supreme Court's decision. Take a listen to an expert.
Even if the prosecutors speed up the appeal process and Lee doesn't purposely delay the legal process, the final issue at hand would be the will of the Supreme Court.
Does this affect President Yoon's impeachment case at the Constitutional Court?
Now, to put it simply, it shouldn't. But the two cases have always been tied together in context as it has to do with the country's 2 most influential politicians, the president and the chairman of the main opposition, which also has the majority on the floor. And by the looks of it, the verdict from the Constitutional Court won't be coming this week, as there were no announcement today, and it usually comes 2 days before the ruling. Now, it's highly likely that it will come before April 18, though, when 2 justices retire. In the meantime, messages from politicians could be different. For example, the ruling People Power Party lawmakers have been accusing Lee of delaying the trial process for his alleged crime, so the presidential election happens before the final ruling. However, Lee has been acquitted, and while prosecutors may appeal, such a message may not carry the same weight as it did before this latest ruling.
All right, Toyon, thanks for the report.
Thank you.
The number of newborns in January noted a remarkable rise from a year ago, having surged over 11%. Park Jun-han covers the latest findings.
As of January, the number of childbirths in South Korea has been on the rise for 7 consecutive months. According to Statistics Korea's data on Wednesday, the number of childbirths in January 2025 was 23,947. This number is 11.6% higher than the 21,461 births in January 2024. That's the biggest percentage increase since related data was first compiled. South Korea's total fertility rate, the average number of children a woman would have during her lifetime, also increased from January 2024's 0.8 children to this January's 0.88 children. The statistics show an increase in the total fertility rate for 25 to 29-year-olds, those in their 30s, and those aged 40 and over. The number of marriages in South Korea has been rising for the past 10 months, with the marriage rate increasing by over 10% compared to the year before for all those 10 months, except for June 2024 and January 2025. In January 2025, the number of marriages came to 20,153, 0.7% higher than that of January last year.
If you look at the marriage growth rate, it has been increasing since April 2024 until now. In January 2025, there was a 0.7% increase, so it looks like the growth rate has decreased a little bit. But it's actually due to the impact of 4 fewer reporting days because of the Seollal holiday in January 2025. If the number of reporting days hadn't decreased by 4, the marriage rate would have been in the 20% range, or at least in double-digit growth.
Even though there has been a recent increase in births and marriages, the declining population in aging society remain concerns for South Korea. As a result of 39,473 deaths in January 2025, the country saw a natural population decline of 15,526 people. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
In other news, U.S. intelligence authorities raised fresh alarms over additional nuclear tests by North Korea and says the regime may use an ICBM tests as an leverage in future talks with Washington. Lee Jae-myung has more.
North Korea may be ready to conduct a nuclear test on short notice. That's according to the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who made the remark while addressing Congress on the 2025 Annual Threat Assessment of the U.S. intelligence community. While assessing security challenges from China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and others, she stressed that Pyongyang is likely prepared to conduct its 7th nuclear test. She added that the regime continues to flight test ICBMs to demonstrate their increasing capabilities as leverage in future negotiations. Her comments are in line with Seoul's assessment that the North has already completed preparations for another nuclear test. Pyongyang last conducted a nuclear test in 2017. The director also noted that the regime is looking to achieve at least tacit recognition as a nuclear power, as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un pursues stronger strategic and conventional capabilities that can target U.S. forces and allies in the region, as well as the U.S. homeland. She added that through such weapons, North Korea is looking to bolster its leverage and stature. Gabbard said those goals are being supported by a strategic partnership with Russia, which gives the regime greater financial, military, and diplomatic assistance. She also said the deployment of North Korean troops to the Kursk region is providing the regime with authentic war-fighting experience. Lee Jae-myung, Arirang News.
Russia and Ukraine have agreed to a naval ceasefire in the Black Sea and to suspend strikes on energy sites in separate deals with the U.S. as a result of 3 days of talks in Saudi Arabia. On the other hand, with a distinct lack of trust between Moscow and Kyiv, both sides said they would rely on Washington to enforce the deals. After the U.S. announcements, the Kremlin said the Black Sea agreements would only come into effect if a number of sanctions against its agricultural export bank were lifted. Effort to better accommodate adoptees from overseas seeking to trace their roots here in Korea continue, with both the government and private entities offering assistance. Pei-Yin-ji has their story.
Kim Sperling was born in Seoul in 1975 and was sent to an adoption agency when he was a month old. He was then adopted in Germany when he was just 7 months.
In a way, I probably totally bought the whole adoption thing that the agency might try to sell to adoptive parents. If I had questioned that, there would have been no place where I could have found answers at that time. You know, in the 80s and the 90s, nobody knew anything about Korea.
He first returned to Korea at the age of 30, seeking to find his roots.
For me, it was about, okay, I gotta clear that relationship between me and Korea. I mean, it's there, and I cannot deny it.
That's when he also made efforts to find his biological parents.
Well, I started looking for them in 2006, so a few weeks later I got an email, and it's like, oh, you know, we looked at the files and we contacted the hospital, and they had another file, and oh yeah, we have a name of your mother. They had a name, I had a birth date, but the police wouldn't locate any person with a matching name and birth date.
He now lives in Korea with his wife and 2 children. He's also a photographer who has worked on projects that portray different stories about Korean adoptees who return to their country of birth. His works also include projects that relate to his Korean heritage, including Dokdo, as well as Korean nurses and miners who were sent to Germany in the mid-1900s.
I'd say I am Korean, I am German, and you know, it's like the way my Koreanness is something that, like, my Korean identity, like my consciousness is like still evolving. It's like I'm learning every day.
Sterling was just one of many Korean children who were sent abroad for adoption. Since 1953, after the country was ravaged by the Korean War, around 200,000 Korean babies are known to have been sent to other countries. Louise Lindberg was adopted in Sweden when she was 12. After working as a social worker in Sweden for 18 years, she decided to return to the country where she was born. She now helps overseas Korean adoptees reconnect with their heritage at a non-profit organization and explains many of those who return have said they feel safe and comfortable.
And just like things like, hey, people just like look like me. And they feel really comfortable because I ask, why did you come? What is the best thing with being in Korea? And they say like, everybody just look like me and I can just feel safe.
The South Korean government is also making efforts to help these Korean adoptees who grew up overseas. The Overseas Korean Agency newly opened a service counter in Central Seoul, aimed at providing a one-stop service that will not only provide interpretation services, but also help them find their birth parents.
One example of the services that this counter could provide is finding parents using DNA matches or providing adoption information.
As the country continues to acknowledge its past on adoption, the government is now hoping to provide full support to make up for decades of lost time. 배은지, Arirang News.
The highest level of wildfire crisis warning, severe level, is in effect all over the country, with dry weather warnings and advisories issued in Gyeongsang-Bukdo province, the eastern parts of the country, inland areas, and Jeju Island. It is important to take extra precautions not to cause any fires. The rain we have been waiting for to relieve the dryness is finally here. Starting with Jeju Island from late afternoon, it will expand to the south coast tonight and most parts of the country tomorrow. The amount of rainfall will not be as much as expected. There's about 5 to 30 millimeters forecast for Jeju Island, 5 to 20 millimeters on the west and south coast, and 5 millimeters in some parts of Gyeongsang-Bukdo province where wildfires are still burning. Tomorrow morning will start mild with rain across the country. Highs will move up to 19 degrees Celsius in Seoul and Daejeon, 24 degrees in Daegu and Gyeongju. Temperatures are expected to fall after the rain stops tomorrow. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.